relatively. And
All right, welcome back to Night School 2025. Back with Daniel Babcock, Wes Schantz, and we're talking about the second of Shakespeare's long poems written during a time of plague when the plays were shut down. This one from 1594, the Rape of Lucrece, from Titus Andronicus Livius, or Livius Andronic, yeah, Titus Livius's account, which was itself from long after the supposed event itself of the rape of Lucretia. Um, well, gents, we're all here. We're all getting towards our holiday break. Uh, Wes, of course, is tending to his new child named after Babcock here, both named Daniel. And as Babcock mentioned to us, also named for his brother, Michael, with his middle name. But so, gentlemen, we have another one of these long poems, not a sonnet, not a play. We had wanted to compare these to those, and perhaps to the Dark Lady as well, insofar as we wanted to. We'd also talked about themes of transformation and of sort of coming to adulthood in a female contact, or sorry, in a male context last time, making comparisons to Hippolytus with our young protagonist. But now we have a female protagonist, though we interestingly do not get her perspective from the beginning of the poem, but rather that of her seducer, but really of her rapist, as it were. So Babcock, prior to talking, you had sent some text saying that you had some insight into a question that I had asked from last time. I don't know if you recall it. It was
don't.
something to do with the motif
Oh,
of of like not heeding the call of nature.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, I'm currently, just finishing up teaching Hamlet and Macbeth and Othello all at the same time, which is pretty great to do. But in Hamlet in particular, uh, I was just noticing a motif from our conversation before about uh, Adonis rejecting this call to maturity that Venus is giving him. And I was just seeing a similar theme playing out in the text of Hamlet. Um, like I struggle with in Hamlet the idea of like, well, what is his tragic flaw? Because he is tasked by a ghost to kill somebody, and not acting immediately on that impulse or on that information seems like a wise move, right? I mean, he's discerning who he can trust. He's discerning whether or not this is true. He's discerning his strategies, and I think that the traditional take that he's indecisive or inactive is not totally correct. However, I do think it is true that he has this self-loathing. I mean, there's so many times he talks about being depressed, suicidal, only seeing no pleasures in the world, thinking that he's in a prison, etc. So that like it feels like his tragic flaw is not his inaction, but his self-loathing about his inaction, which I think is part of that spiraling of the like refusal to mature, because he's also contrasted with Laertes and Fortinbras as these two examples of men who are willing to act, damn the consequences. I think Fortinbras is maybe a better example for Hamlet, or rather inversely, as the play plays out, Hamlet is a better example for Fortinbras for how to be, as the play works in a recursive way. But yeah. So, anyways, like I just have the benefit of like reading these books. We just read Crime and Punishment in school, so it's like and I've read it multiple times, so just kind of thinking about them over time. Um, and there's a line after it's in the York scene with the skull, but it's at the very end of it. He's got a little quatrain about Caesar, Imperious Caesar. I'm gonna bastardize the line. I'm not gonna remember it exactly, but the premise is like the great Caesar's um uh, flesh is turning to dust, which could be turned into a patch for a wall and keep the winter wind away from for somebody. And like all three times I taught it today, I was like getting emotional just thinking about that. It's just like a really beautiful, profound image of this like notion of uh, what we're really here for in this contemplating existence. Like, it's to help people out. And like, if Hamlet can't accept that, then he can't move on. So, anyways, I guess to wrap up this little mini essay that I've just said to you all, I apologize for monopolizing the time, is
All good.
that what I really appreciate about studying all of literature, and particularly talking about it with you guys, but one thing is like learning so much about Shakespeare and reading it for so long is seeing now like seeing Shakespeare as an early writer writing on a similar theme that then matures over time, um, and shifts. Um, and so another piece about, or another thing that I was thinking about with the Rape of Lucrece is we also get an image like we do in Hamlet of a character contemplating a work of art,
Yes.
and that inspiring them to sort of like meditate on their own life. And I think of that now. Of course, in Hamlet, this becomes much more complex, nuanced, and sophisticated. In that, then he not only is looking at art, but he then is also looking at a skull. But you have Lucrece here, like looking at this painting and thinking about the rape of herself being like the rape of Troy, and kind of like it's both grand and also small at the same time. So, anyways, those were my kind of initial thoughts. I don't really have a question per se, but those are my initial thoughts.
I I liked the connection with the skull of Yorick. Is that the piece of art that you're referring to, or is it, are they looking at something else right before that? I don't
No, and
remember.
no. I'm just talking in Hamlet. I'm talking more about the idea of. I mean, he says we're going to use the play, the mousetrap, as a mirror
Okay,
to
the
show
play.
The dumb
nature
Yeah, yeah,
show,
against
yeah,
yeah.
himself, and then also he has these little miniature pictures of his father and Claudius that he shows his mother, and he says, "I'm going to
Oh,
show the mirror to yourself," right? So there's a lot of reflection. I mean, in that Kenneth Branagh, which is the main one that I show, the whole main what do you call it? Castle room.
the
We call it the main
hall.
castle room. Yeah, the main hall, I guess, is it's all mirrors, right? It's a hall of mirrors. So
Yeah,
like clearly that's a motif that's present in the play.
yeah. I think a little bit of the conversation with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern where he talks about himself as a musical instrument too,
Mm.
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
they think that they can play him so easily, right?
Yes.
So in that
Yes.
sense, so like th this image that you're saying of like this thing that keeps out the wind, it's like an inversion of that image where they're using their breath to
Oh
work
yeah.
work on him
Good.
with their rhetoric, their wiles, their pretended friendship. And
Yeah.
I think you're right that there is something about him that is very difficult to love, and he's so intelligent that he can't help but see that. But on the other hand, I think what he has that no one else in the play seems to have is a Horatio. He's got
Yeah.
someone who wants to tell his story, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what he does for Yorick with the skull. He's sort of telling this story. Maybe it's true, maybe it's mostly fanciful, but the important thing is that the the life that we live is bounded by a sleep, but there is something after it, and it's not just what we experience, whatever our consciousness or soul or whatever experiences. Those aren't the only dreams, right? There's also the dreams of theater, of art, of stories that are told about people, and I think it's natural to kind of look for the reason why, he's a flawed character, um, and yet I think the complexity of all of Shakespeare's characters, particularly the principal ones like a Hamlet, like a Caesar, those kinds of characters, is it's not reducible to a
Yeah.
single kind of tragic
Right.
flaw or something like that. And
Right.
and I mean, obviously that's um, something that he's building on in uh, the
Rape of
classical
Lucrece.
tradition,
Yeah.
but he's definitely doing some new things with that. That yeah are Well, I think that looking at these poems and comparing them to his plays, he gets to he gets to really you know dwell on descriptions in a way that in the plays is a little bit artificial. I mean, maybe here it's artificial too, but
Mm.
descriptions of art and things like that. Yeah, settings. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. And one of the commentaries I was looking at, that's something that supposedly elevated 18th century appraisals of Shakespeare, but then alienates today in the so-called TikTok generation. So
What is the depictions of art?
the the long form nature of
Oh
it,
yeah, yeah, of course.
or sorry, the sort of long elaborate descriptions.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's interesting how some ages appreciate flourishes and some an economy of language. But I wanted to pick up on what Babcock was saying about the difference between the early writer and the late. So you were describing three plays that were written in the span of 4 years, 1601 to 1605, and are generally considered three of his four great tragedies. Those come 7 to 11 years after this work. And so just sort of connecting the notion that you said you were mentioning of a complex character who is so complicated that he doesn't have an unnuanced notion of hamartia. He doesn't have a conventional sort of tragic flaw like hubris, like is often said of Oedipus. Even though, I will mention that the idea of hamartia is actually more like just a mistake. And so it's just a tragic misstep. And
Yeah.
so it doesn't need to be an ingrained flaw of character. It can be even scarier. You can just misstep. But again, what is the misstep? Like you say with Hamlet, and with the flow of information and the knowledge problem that he has, and who to trust, living in or dead, very difficult for him. And so that makes me wonder with this work, where characters are painted sort of black and white. There's a rapist and a raped individual. They're almost sort of biblically, and
Mm.
perhaps that's a good correlate, but also Trojan like with Helen. Um, uh, they're like biblically archetypal. And one is clearly evil and darkly so. And maybe we can think about what makes him so. Is he just a slave to his passions in some gorgeous way, or is there some true malevolence to him, or is there some political commentary there? But what seems to be present in either the plays or in his later work, and this is my initial hypothesis based on what you gentlemen have put forward so far, is that he does not yet have the level of characterization necessary. He has the rhetorical flourish. He has the way with words, but he has not yet created a character that will eventually inspire like a Dostoevsky or Raskolnikov, like a Hamlet, or like an Othello, or an Iago, or a
Uh,
Cleopatra, for that matter, just to put a different one out there, or Rosalind. But okay, so my question though is it because he's a younger poet here, or is it that the long poem style and more of an Iliadic, and maybe that's arguable way, does not admit of good characterization? Does drama or the theater lend itself to characterization, even for somebody of equivalent verbal ability, early Shakespeare and later Shakespeare, or is it not the medium? It's him, or even yet another hypothesis is it the material? Just the
so
fact, yeah.
okay, yeah. I was just going to add another wrinkle or hypothesis to your point is I I I think it might be also subject matter. um and I think stylistic choices, right? Like I think he's choosing to not depict these characters in uh as complex a way or as three-dimensional a way as he later does, whether that's because he needs to mature as a writer or just because, you know, that's just what he does. I don't know. But I mean, okay, as you're talking, what I was thinking about is like, all right, I don't think it is the genre because I can think of not so much in the past. because Dante comes before this, and
Yes.
I think of the protagonist, the pilgrim in Dante, as being more nuanced than these characters in either Venus and Adonis or late Rape of Lucrece. Um, and then I don't think it is. I was also thinking about. Oh, I'm losing my train here. I was also thinking about how the classic plays have a stilted quality to them. Like
Hmm.
if we say, well, it's in drama, you can be more nuanced with characters. Well, but Oedipus isn't all that nuanced. I mean, those characters are fairly, um, I mean, there's
They have
some
masks.
subtlety.
Greek
Exactly.
tragedy is different from
Yes, exactly.
Elizabethan.
Exactly. I mean, I literally just talked about this with my students the other day about how, Oedipus is in Greek tragedy, they're wearing masks, so there's a distance with the audience, and that also makes them as if they're godlike anyways.
Hmm.
Whereas in Elizabethan theater, they're on the same level. The groundlings are right there. They're human beings that they're looking at. Um, so then the question is like, well, is this a reflection of the era that he's writing in? That the theater and the art form, as Hamlet says, is a mirror up to nature, and it's showing the society itself, and this is what the society is, and it maybe takes a Shakespeare to move it from where he is in the Rape of Lucrece into, in just 5 short years, but into um, a realm that can produce a Hamlet, or a realm that can produce an Othello, or a realm that can produce a Macbeth.
Yeah, oh yeah, go on, Wes.
The thought that came to my mind was about Milton. Milton is a pretty important, epic poet in the English language, capable of crafting some memorable characters, some less memorable characters. And it's an interesting problem, like trying to read, say, Paradise Lost and interpret the nature of his um, larger than life, mythological figures that he's depicting, including like God and Jesus and the devil and sin and death and
Yeah.
Adam and Eve. Um, so yeah, I think there's a significant problem with Shakespeare also is that we have kind of inherited him as the creator of, great characters. It's really hard to dispute that or to see any other way of looking at him at this point. And so I don't trust myself as a critic really to kind of like pick apart uh, what's going on with him. And in this particular, early stage of his career where you're seeing some of the seams and the messiness, maybe some of the still unformed ideas, he remains, just as great, like just as awesome. Um, and so it seems like if there's something inhibiting the development of these characters, I would tend to lay the blame more on the conventions that he's working within than any kind of like lack on his part or his ability to shape the content that he's using. Like, I mean, this is all mythological, it's all legendary, um, it's all larger than life, and in that way, I think it is quite different from most of his plays, which are pretty much, you know, recognizable human beings for the most part. Um, but but yeah, it's definitely more of a spectrum, and like these characters are more recognizably human than like the more allegorical figures in Venus and Adonis. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think I would tend to agree. Like if he were to, let's say, in 1606, if Risley came back and said, "I want you to make a play version of Rape of Lucrece," I could see these characters being much more fleshed out on
Hmm.
stage. Plus, also embodied, right? Like,
Yes.
I think that there's something to the fact that he's writing for an actor to portray this in front of people, and that shifts the way you think about a character and what you have a character say and do. or the way that they say and do something.
Well, and I think that, that goes back to the problem of the development of artistic voice and the anxiety of influence. The less developed an artist's voice is, the more they rely on their primary sources. And so here he draws from Ovid's Fasti, for the story itself, as well as from Livy, but also Ovid's Metamorphoses when he mentions the nightingale. This is probably the most terrible, one of the most terrible myths, and among many terrible myths in Ovid's Metamorphoses. So terrible that there's actually an Ovid like moralize, like a moralized Ovid in the Middle Ages. But that's Philomela, or Philomela, she's called here, and a story of a princess whose sister is, trigger warning, uh, taken by a prince who is the husband to the sister, taken into the woods, has her tongue cut out, is raped, and is kept in the woods until she manages to sew a message to her sister, who then gets revenge on her by cooking her child for her husband, who had done this to her sister. But all that goes to say is that and also Sinon, which he's fairly prominent in near the end of the Inferno, with Master Adam as a representative of lying, almost in one of the deepest pockets of hell, circle 810. But that all just goes to say is that I think what we might detect as missing from the later works, if it's not due to medium, could clearly be because Shakespeare was developed in his rhetoric at this point, was exploring different genres, was trying to find his artistic medium, or at least here was exploring different media because he had to, because he couldn't produce plays at this time, and that because of that, one gets the less dynamic, personal, individualized representations that, even though it's Cleopatra, or even though it's Mark Antony, or even though it's Caesar, it's clearly Shakespeare speaking through them. That he adds to their greatness with his own voice. Here I see him taking on a major theme and a major story, and he does, and so he does individualize it to some extent. I mean, he does make it his, the rationale that is given by Lucrece, and he gives this strange interplay between the argument, which some scholars think is not actually written by him, and the story itself. There are a lot of things from the story of the Rape of Lucrece that are not included in the poem. So he is showing his own sort of artistic discernment in the choices that he's making, as well. So perhaps also it's less clear the ways in which he is expressing his artistic judgment and his artistic voice in this medium than it is in the medium of stagecraft.
Yeah, I wanted to look at the structure of this poem. Actually reminded me of, like, the setup of it reminded me of some of the stories that are inset in Don Quixote, right? Which
Yes,
all, or almost all,
absolutely.
seem to be about, like, jealousy and how to know for sure that you are loved and that your wife is true to you, and this kind of search for ideality, right? Perfection among human beings. And um, these kinds of plot machinations, they get really intense in some of Shakespeare's plays, right? Like a late play like The Winter's Tale, where, like, some very small remark sets in motion this huge thing, or even in Lear, right? One of the great tragedies, where the inability of the daughter to say that she loves her father the best, um, that is enough to sort of precipitate everything else. Um, but in this case, it's the kind of boasting, or at least celebrating, praising, the wife. that sort of plants the seed, it seems like. But like you mentioned, the other piece of that is like the power that the king possesses, that he feels entitled to. He feels like, this, even though he sort of knows, right, on the one hand that this is a bad idea, he goes ahead and acts on that desire. And all of the um, kind of uh, mythic qualities, the legendary qualities of Lucrece, they come back to her being extolled in this way by her husband, which I found really interesting. Um, and the part that he plays in the story later is minimal, right? I mean, she is the figure that's remembered, and rightly so. Um, but somehow it's this dynamic of jealousy again that I think is there in many of the sonnets as well, but certainly the plays. Um, Shakespeare's
You know,
really
I'm
that's
great book.
that. Oh, just a quick little note. What you're making me think about is Desdemona,
Yeah,
um,
right.
who, I mean, he says, I will not drop her blood. I'm gonna memorialize her. Well, I'm blanking on what he says. It's not ivory. What's the rock that he used? Anyways, the idea is that he's gonna kill her and strangle her instead of cutting her skin because it's alabaster, so it can remain like
Alabaster.
a monument, right? Which and Desdemona is. I like she's a terrific character and she does have texture to her, but I think she's idealized, even as she's dying, she says, I did this myself. Like I didn't love him in the right way. It's my fault that blah 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 blah. Um, so which is not to say she's not complex, but yeah, that's good good insight.
so uh, you mentioned Don Quixote, and so I think you're remembering the major set piece from the end of part one with Don Fernando and Cardenio and
Mm,
Lucinda and Dorotea, where
that's a lost
Cardenio
play of Shakespeare, supposedly. There's a Cardenio play that's lost, apparently, of Shakespeare.
and so
But yeah, sorry.
Cardenio talks up um, uh, his lady love, Lucinda, to a Don Fernando, and then Don Fernando, who's already taken the virginity of this Dorotea and promised himself to her, betrays her and Cardenio at the same time by going to pursue Lucinda, and it all ends up working out in the end thanks to Don Quixote. But the bragging element, and that is itself, that goes all the way back to one of the first stories of course, from Herodotus's histories with the King Candales. And the King Candales, and you'll know this name if you don't know that name, which you may, is telling his advisor Gyges
Yes.
about the beauty of his wife, the same
Mm.
Gyges that Plato would later also immortalize with the Ring of Gyges and the Republic. And so
I
that
just
Gyges is told that he needs to look upon the naked wife of this Kendales. He does. She sees it. She then insists that he die or her husband die. So he chooses a husband and becomes King Gyges. But right, so it almost makes one think that he is trying to go for sort of like that Greek pathos element, and that he is taking on one of the great themes, sort of like in
Mhm.
Oedipus here. So again, like unlike Hamlet, the who has a greatness of character through his through his psychology and how introspective and complex he is. Here, it's just a very powerful archetypal situation.
it's like the
Um,
bluntness of political power, which overlays onto the intimacy of private relationships.
and that's also a huge element
Yeah,
in all of these,
yeah,
right? That there is a higher, like Don Fernando is Don Fernando,
yeah,
not like Don Quixote. He is a lord.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so right, he can just sort of impose his will on Cardenio, who is not of the same station as he is. And so same here. I mean, so this Tarquinius, this guy's name is Sextus Tarquinius, but his father's name is Tarquinius Superbus,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
the
The
arrogant,
greatest.
the
Yeah, yeah,
proud.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Superbia is the sin of pride in in Latin.
Mm.
And so that comes obviously a little bit later than classical Latin, but Shakespeare also comes after that. But yeah, so superbus means proud, and so yeah, right. You have a tyrant situation politically, and so this tyrant, like a Gilgamesh, acts too tyrannically, apparently. Apparently, yeah, and again, like a Paris of Troy.
Mm.
Um, there's just the like the lex primi noctis does not seem to be a tenable lex. It seems to be the opposite of that. Like if you want to ensure that you destroy your kingdom, do something weird involving marital relations, whether you're David, King David, or which he with the Bathsheba situation, or your Oedipus and the mom situation, or you take by force your friends, your kinsman actually's wife.
Life. Yeah. What's also interesting about what something you just said about um, Tarquinius Superbus is that he's not featured at all. He's like a specter around the whole poem.
So
And then
Shakespeare's always on good ghosts.
and exactly right, and he's overthrown at the end, right? It's like it's this ominous, like this bad thing is, well, I mean, bad, good for the people, but bad for his this family is about to happen to them because of these actions as this spectral of power going on. Yeah, and so that's another example of like the ghost of the father. Yeah, that's good.
Not so different from, I mean, I'm just making broad connections now, especially because we've just been reading so much Dostoevsky together too, but not so different from what will also happen to the Russian dynasty in the early
Mhm.
20th
Yeah,
century on the
yes.
heels of Dostoevsky writing that. I don't know that it's, quite as on the nose as that. There's not an act like that that leads to the overthrow of Alexander the Tsar. Sorry to see that name there in that context. To
But the
measure out Caesar. Yeah.
French Revolution, right? I mean,
Right.
no,
No,
no rape, but it's like you get the like in if we believe something like Dickens, right? The boy being run over in the street, violation of the sacred family, right? Um, so yeah, I think you're right.
but yeah, right. So, but what is featured here is, and maybe, okay, so I wonder if this, I'm just throwing out big hypotheses today. And this is proved wrong by many of the dynamic situations that characters in both in Hamlet and Macbeth and numerous other plays find themselves in. But is it because Shakespeare is here trying to take on archetypally one of the most charged possible situations that it doesn't require a wit of his magnitude, or it doesn't allow for a wit of his magnitude to actually highlight a situation and to show how powerful it is that something he does better later? Here it's almost like you could just give a synopsis and that would still be very powerful for what happens.
You, one
um
one thing it made the reaction between Lucretius and Colantine made me think about is the in my mind the most melodramatic part of Hamlet, which is Ophelia's burial scene, which comes right after this, you know, my favorite scene in the play, which is the skull with Yorick. When he and Laertes are competing over who gets to be more sad over Ophelia's death, right? It's like bury us both together, the quick and the dead, and then he's like, you'll make Asa a wart. You know, I just watched this, so I got it in my head. But so your original question was, oh yeah, um, it's I think yeah, I mean I think it is. This is a little bit more melodrama. It's the act itself is so heinous that there isn't really that much complexity to it, right? I mean, uh, the kid comes in, he asks her for something, she says no, and he just says, "Well, if you don't do it, I'm going to frame you for it. So you might as well just do it."
and kill a slave, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's tricky, it's deceitful, it's
yeah. I got to go off camera for about 2 seconds here. I got a phone call coming in that is telling me I have a snow day tomorrow. Pardon me,
Oh,
Jen.
wonderful.
Celebration
Well,
time.
he'll be happy when he gets back. Okay, so well, I think we're getting close to when we probably had to go anyway. So just to make a quick tangent, I do kind of feel like we're just hitting our stride though, which is a little sad. If we were to do some Keats, do you think we should do one or two, or Okay, so Babcock, sorry,
Okay.
we
Sorry.
transitioned to scheduling just
Yes,
because
of
we
course.
had a second,
Yes,
and
yes.
Wes had brought up the notion of doing some Keats,
Oh yeah, great. Sign me
and
up.
so I was just
I like how
asking.
Keith just slowly emerged into the frame there. You did a nice reveal there. That was great.
He just
He
comes into things like
listen,
that.
man.
It's
Beauty, truth, truth, beauty.
well, so there's some famous things we should probably read, even though I'm sure we've all read them, like Ode to a Grecian Urn. But Wes got me pretty eager to jump right into Endymion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great.
And let me,
I know some about Endymion, but not a lot.
no, well, yeah, I know there's a lot that I can learn. Oh, yeah, and of course there's a little short poem on a dream after reading of Paolo and Francesca and Dante's
Yep.
Inferno. We'll have
I've taught that one before.
we'll have to get to that.
Chapman's
Okay.
Homer. That's a great one too.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah. Ode to Psyche, Ode to a Grecian Urn,
Obviously, Ode on the Nightingale. Man, that's
Hyperion. Okay, let's see. Where is this Endymion in my? I have the Modern Library complete poems. Um,
There's
I
also a really interesting letter. If it's
hmm,
got some of the letters, it probably has it where he has the famous phrase about negative capability applied to Shakespeare. He's discussing Shakespeare and what makes him great, and he comes up with this concept of negative capability. And I think, yeah, that the Nightingale, the Endymion, those would all be, some really resonant places to look, having just read a bunch of Shakespeare and kind of thought about what makes him so good.
all right. Well, it looks like it might go on for a little while. This Endymion. It starts at my page 159, goes on to like 187. We might have to, if we start with that, break it up a little bit. But it does have three books, at least three books. Um, a fourth book. It's unfinished.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. Would you guys want to read a book or two of this Endymion?
how
Uh,
how many pages is it you're saying?
I think 130 total.
Oh, that's a lot. Wow. Yikes. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
A thing of beauty is a
when
joy
do we want to
forever.
try to when do we want to try to when?
I could do next week.
Next week's gonna be tough for me. I mean, maybe late next week. Hold on. I'm trying to get a sense of this here. I don't know if I might have to order this. I might have to order this book first. Okay, well, let's just say yes, and then we can figure the specifics out later. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Through book one, that's
What
around 30 pages of poetry.
what day? Well, let me also look at like a calendar type object here. Uh, I mean, I could also do early of the week of Christmas if that is possible, but Thursday.
Or both.
Let me let's just say we can put Thursday in the books and I'll see what I can do. I'll try to make it happen. I gotta get a copy of that book.
Okay. Yeah.
I should
If
have
anybody
pizza.
wants to, Wes had a pretty cool copy too, so you should know that you have some cool options too. Wes, what was your edition?
It's a folio society.
Whoa.
It's part of a collection called the Folio Poets, where they have, I think they focus on the ones I have anywhere, Keats, Wordsworth. I think there's also a Coleridge one. I don't
Mm,
have that one. So they seem to focus on the romantics, at least. I don't know, maybe that's just the editions that I was looking at the time. But these are some of the first like nice books I ever got. Stuff from Folio Society. They're so beautiful. Um, and yeah, this one's called The Complete Poems. I don't really trust that. It's like probably just like, well, I don't know. Doesn't seem long enough, but anyway.
Yeah. Well,
How you doing though?
yeah, I'm not, well, I'm tempted to get another edition. Always tempted to get more editions. All right, gents. Well, wonderful to see you. And again, congratulations, Wes, and keep going. And same to you, Babcock, because you have finals or your students do next week, but that's still a big week for you. So
Yeah, yeah,
Enjoy the snow day.
enjoy the
yeah.
snow day.
Likewise.
Did you get the snow day?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, well, really enjoy that.
I
Uh,
will. Thank you.
all right. Well, see you guys.
All right.